In this video, we're going to get started with configuring an M241 processor. Before I add the M241 to the configuration, I'm going to go to the Properties tab and make some simple changes in the project settings to make the project the way I want it. First thing is, by default, this is checked for creating variable and I/O mapping. I don't want SoMachine to create my variable name for me, so I'm going to uncheck this. The second thing that I like to make sure of is my source download. I don't want to download the source code only on demand. I want to be reminded typically that I need to do this. If I forget to do it and somebody comes after me, they're not going to be able to get in line with the controller with the latest project, so I want to make sure that happens. If I come back to workflow, I can now double click on configuration. I'm going to go to a logic controller, M241, and I'll just select the first one here, and I'm going to add it. Now that we see the controllers added to the project, I'm just going to say OK. And I'm going to the application design, to the controller part of the program. Double click here. Project takes a little while to open up. Now the project is open. Let's see a little bit about the project here. I can see the project has, under the hardware devices tree, has some inputs and outputs that are associated with the controller. First thing I want to do is give my inputs and outputs a couple names that we can use in the project. I see the inputs come up. I'm going to simply give a couple inputs some names. And I'll give an output some names. To add additional I/O cards to it, I can come over here to this area here under Devices and Modules, and I'm going to look for I/O Modules tab up top here, and I can see that there's all different types of cards. I'm going to select in the family Analog Input, just to show you configuring analog input, but we do have safety cards, analog outputs, and cartridges as well. TM3 are the newer version of the I/O cards, so I want to stick with that. And I'm going to simply click and drag the TM3 module over until I see the bolded area, and I drop it here, and you'll see that it'll add the module right underneath it. I'll double click on that module, and I want to give it a variable name. Once the variable has a name, I go to the tab above it, and I want to configure it. Right now it's configured for not used. I want to configure that it's used. I'll click there. I'll configure it to the type of input that I have. There's a 4 to 20. We can see that the default scaling of this is 4,000 to 20,000. I can change that scaling to anything I want here. It's a hard scale. I'll leave it as is right now. We can see the range. You can go pretty high here and pretty low. If I wanted to scale that in the actual program, I'd use a function block FB_scaling. We will leave that for where it is right now. The next thing I want to do is come to my Applications Tree tab, and I want to add a section of logic. So I'll just expand this a little bit. I'll come to the green plus, and I want to add a section of logic. It's called a POU, Programmable Organization Unit. We're going to leave it as a program, and we're going to change it over to ladder. In my case, it's the 6 IEC languages. I'm going to add a section of ladder. The other thing we need to do for that section of logic that was just created is we need to make sure it gets scanned. I can double click on mast, or I can simply drag the POU onto the mast, and it puts it under here, and I can see that that section of logic right now will cyclically go every 20 milliseconds inside of there. I can change that if I want. Going into the POU, I'm going to add some simple logic. If I know what my variable name is, I can simply start typing it, and it'll filter for me automatically. So in this case, I'm going to call it my motor here. There's my motor. If I forget what my variable name is, I can go to the three dots, and I can search for it. In this case, I know it's under the second tab, and I search for it. My start. Okay. Now I'm going to build the project. I see there's 0 arrows, 0 warnings, so I'm going to go in online mode. I'm going to put myself in simulation mode. Now that I've selected simulation mode, I can simply log into the controller. Whoops. I'm going to log in. My controller is stopped. I can see by the green here. I want to start my control. The project is now running. We can simply come here, right-click, add a watch window. I've created a watch window with 3 variables in it. I can create a prepared value for the start and stop to make it go. Go to the debug screen, write those values, and you can see the motor turns on.